And the latest Kilcoyne conversation, this is a first, I believe. It's not just, we've got a comedian on the show, a Kirkwoodian, is that the right phrase? But we met at a park. I don't know if Greg Warren has ever had a reporter say, can you meet me up at the park? I got to say, this feels pretty weird.
Yeah, we're in a gazebo, man.
Is this your first gazebo interview?
Oh, definitely, yeah. And I've always looked forward to doing a gazebo interview, but and I knew it was going to happen at some point. But yeah, it's raining, so Martin was like, "Well, can we just do it in the gazebo?" Yeah.
This is our new world, though. Meeting people. I'll text a coach, and they'll say, "Do you want to just come to my driveway?" And I was leaving the house, and my wife said, "Where are you going?" I said, "I'm going up to the park." She said, What are you doing at the park? I said, I'm doing an interview. And I said, I didn't know we'd be under the gazebo, but it started raining. Greg's a busy guy, though. The new video is out, Where the Field Corn Grows. Did I get the title right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And you had to distinguish for everyone, right? Is there corn, and then there's field corn?
Yeah, no, there's two kinds. There's sweet corn, that's what we eat. And then there's field corn, and that's what the animals eat. And it's really easy to remember once they explain it to you, because field corn is grown in a field, whereas sweet corn is grown in a field. So you can see they really do a good job of delineating.
Did you learn along the way a little bit? Because we've all driven by and we'll say, hey, look, that's knee high by the 4th of July. It's good for eating. And the farmer's like, that's not for people.
Yeah.
We think we know, but we don't.
Yeah. No, I was sort of fooling around with this new hour of material, and I was up in New York at Sirius XM's office, and I know the guy up there that runs the comedy, all the comedy, and he was like, "Hey, what do you got?" And I'm like, I think I'm going to get you guys an hour next year. New hour. He's like, "What's it about?" And I go, "I don't know, man." I go, "There's just one joke about farming," and I told it, and he was like, "You got to do it all. You got to do it all about farming." And he goes, "I'll play it a bunch. We'll get you like a special. I'll get you somebody to produce a special if you for Amazon if you do it." So it's not all about farming, but it's probably about half about farming. And I did go to I went to farms, man. I never have researched.
You knock on the door, knock on the barn. Hey, yeah. Can I talk to you for a minute?
I call in advance. Martin. But they were all really, really gracious. But they knew I was like a rube. I remember one time I was calling this guy. It was around the harvest or whatever, and I was like I wanted to go out and see some stuff, and I was like, "Hey, are the crops still up?" He's like they were Christmas decorations or something.
Take them down.
Yeah. I think you mean, have we harvested yet? But yeah, I went to farm in Southern Illinois. Was the first place. That guy, like the closing joke on the special came right from that guy. Something that guy said, and then one up in Louisiana, Missouri. And then I travel a bunch, so I went to one in Florida and Bermuda. I went to a farm in Bermuda. Actually.
What do you say? What's your opening line to them? Hey, I'm going to make jokes about you. I mean, how do you?
I mean, I just would usually reach out by email and be like, hey, I'm a comedian and I'm doing this, shooting a comedy special. It's mostly about farming, and I was wondering if I could just come interview you. And some of them are reluctant, but everybody said they'd do it.
And I did hear. I haven't seen the whole special, but the bit where it's like chores, right? So when we were a kid, we all had allowance and chores, but on the farm, the stakes are a little higher.
Yeah. I said something effective like, because when I was a kid, if I didn't do my chores, I got grounded, and if a farm kid doesn't do his chores, the bank forecloses on the family's farm. And I did learn about like those kids. Like a lot of those farmers are rich. They're pretty wealthy, and you don't. One of the things this guy told me is you don't ask them how many acres they got. That's like asking how much money you make. Like that's really
That's
you don't say how many acres you got. But the whole thing, like the way they get bigger, the way that like if a farmer's really rich and he's got a ton of land, it's because for 6 or so generations there was at least one kid that wanted to keep farming. So these guys, they have all these kids, and they're just, a lot of them don't want to farm, and they're just hoping there's at least one that's going to keep it going, which I think is it's fascinating because there's probably some other neighbor farmer like lurking around, be like, "Heard your boy's afraid of farm animals, Fred." You getting
ready to pounce?
Yeah, just ready to pounce down on those on that land. Yeah.
Well, you got the special out, and people can see it online. That's the beauty of comedy, I think, right now, is so much stuff available online. However, you're a busy guy. You work the road. How crazy has it been? How maybe boring or nutty the last few months not being able to travel?
It's different. I mean, I quit my day job in 2001, I think. And I probably have been on the road an average, like 45 weeks a year since then. So until right around March 15th. And I went from basically March 15th to, late June without having left St. Louis County. So, or really Kirkwood.
Were you doing material? Now you're walking around the house like, anyway, guy walks into a bar.
For like the first 3 weeks, I was trying to really continue the writing process. Maybe the first 6 weeks, I had a hot streak writing, so I was keeping it going, and I would maybe go for a walk. I've walked all over Kirkwood, man. And I'd just go for a walk and like talk to myself. I look like a lunatic, and then it started to fade away, and I just went to work on a few other projects that I've been saying. That's the problem with this thing, like all that stuff that you're like, well, if I had the time, I would do all. I'd write a book or I'd write a screenplay, and you have to face up to like, well, you have the time. Will you really do that?
I saw a quote about the whole quarantine, and somebody said, it's really amazing how little I got done that I said I would get done. Like, we were going to clean the garage, and I know it's true. And I think people were largely not depressed, but kind of like highly unmotivated. Like, thinking the world's so fucked up that you were like, God, I don't know.
Yeah.
Should I even get out of bed? It sounds weird. I think that's why, and people say, well, you're a sports guy, but I think like getting back to comedy clubs, having a baseball game on TV, it's not essential, but I think some of it, people just need to know the world's not over.
Yeah.
It's a weird mindset.
Yeah, I agree with you. I mean, I'm such a baseball fan. For me, there's something wrong with the rhythm of the summer right now. Or I can't imagine for you guys, but
got guys sitting in gazebos talking instead of going to a baseball game.
Yeah. I don't think you'd be out here if the Cardinals are playing. It looks like we're playing in a wedding or something out here.
Wedding play. I wish people would, if we could have like the Homer Simpson thought bubble, people walking around here like what they're thinking is actually going on. But you'll get back out on the road. Ideally, that's the hope, right? And I've always said it's hard to be funny when there's no audience. You need, a lot of it, you feed off of that, right?
Yeah. I mean, it's certainly a lot easier if there's something coming back at you. I've been in enough situations over the years. I moved to New York. I lived in L.A. for a long time, and I lived in New York most recently. And New York really sort of got me just comfortable with you could just perform wherever because you do it so many different places there, and sometimes the crowds are hot, and sometimes they're not at all. I used to perform at this place called Dangerfields a lot when I was up there, and it's fun, but it's not the most populated. Like they're talking about now, like, oh, we're going to bring comedy clubs back, and it's a 50% occupancy. If Dangerfield's ever got 50% occupancy during the week, it would be the greatest night they've ever had, dude.
Yeah, it's kind of like I said, a Marlins game. It's fine.
Yeah.
You can open the gates. It's okay.
Yeah. There's actually them in Tampa. It doesn't matter at all, right? Yeah.
So ideally, you're back out there, and when you have a video out like this, are you like, is it when a movie comes out, are you on the circuit kind of promoting it now? And we should tell people they get it on Amazon, right?
Yeah, Amazon, Amazon Prime. If you're a Prime member, it's free. If you're not, I don't know, it's like $3 or $5 to rent or something. I don't know. On Amazon is the primary place for it. But yeah, typically, like, you sort of tour. I wonder how that is, and maybe it's a little different than musicians because you sort of like you're touring for 2 or 3 years, trying to build that hour in the clubs, and then
the videos after.
Yeah, and then you get then you film the special, or you record the CD, put it out, and then you kind of get to work on hey, what's the next thing going to be? Luckily, like, we shot this a year ago, basically. So I had, up until COVID, I had about 6-9 months to sort of work on something else. So I got another 30 minutes in my pocket that nobody's seen. So if I go out, it's also weird. Like, you can't just keep doing the same material. But there is a thing with comics, like, they do want to hear some of the hits a little bit. Like they, so I usually wind up doing, hey, I'm doing as much new material as I have, and then I'll play like just do the hits from the last 3 or 4 projects, the stuff that resonated the most, I guess.
Will you do? Can you make coronavirus jokes, or is that either hackneyed, overdone by everyone on Twitter, or is it also like, hey, this isn't funny. This shit was terrible,
Well, I mean, as long as I think you can find something funny about it as long as you're on. As long as you can sort of. There's nothing funny about the heart of it, but there's a lot of tangential. Is that a word?
I believe that sounds right.
I was a J school grad, but I don't know whether it was.
You didn't even know what the bury the lead.
Oh yeah, did you see?
I didn't either. I was broadcast journalism, so it's spelled LEDE.
Yeah, bury the lead, or don't bury the lead is spelled LEDE. And I just found this out this weekend on a crossword puzzle, and I have a degree in journalism.
I saw some of the writers chiming in, I read
Derek
it.
Gould he knew all about it, man. Derek Gould got way into the
weeds.
It was fascinating. Like he was talking about, he's passionate about that stuff, so it was really cool to read. But then unfortunately, like the problem with the internet is Derek Gould, there's this great journalistic mind. And some idiot arguing with him about just throwing anything out there. I'm like, don't engage with this guy, man.
Right. Nobody's safe.
No,
on the internet. Well, you said you were a journalism grad, but you said I was busy wrestling at the time. Are there a lot of college wrestlers on the comedy circuit right now? I'm thinking that's a small group.
I know of. I bet there's maybe 4 or 5. There's a guy named Mike Vecchione who's really funny. Up in New York, and he wrestled for Penn State just for a couple years. I think he was like a red shirt up there, or I don't think he started for him, and he didn't stay the whole time. But Penn State was an elite program, so there may be there's a couple other guys, man. Yeah.
But did you think? And granted, you went out into the real world, quote unquote. But did you ever think in grade school, high school? Like, hey, I like making people laugh. People ask me, were you the class clown? I said, no, but I wrote for him.
I got you.
And
that's great.
Did you ever think?
That's really funny you said that, because the writer, I've been part of the St. Louis comedy scene for a long time, so I see we got a lot of young comics that are really good, and I've seen some come through, and early on it's like the comic that's completely comfortable on stage, and they're sort of loud or boisterous, or and they're just animated, and they're doing well. And then there's somebody that's not doing well, but I can see I'm like, oh, but what he's saying is actually really, really interesting, or what she's saying is if they hang in, they're gonna figure it out, and then they sort of pass up the other comic after a while.
But was there a time when you thought, I could do comedy for a living, and since you walked away from the real world, and was there ever a day you said, oh my God, what was I thinking?
I mean, early on it was really sort of, I was working for Procter & Gamble in sales, and I was making a lot of money, a lot. And I'd been there for 10 years, but I was getting really bored with it. And in comedy, so on the road, most of the road clubs, there's an MC, and he's usually somebody local, and he gets paid nothing. And then there's a middle comic, and they make $500 for a week, and they give him a hotel room or something. And then there's a headliner who's in the middle, and the headliner usually from out of town. So I was doing selling Pringles and Jif and stuff like that, living in Cincinnati, and I was always the first guy, and it sucks. It's not fun. You have to go up to a cold audience, you have to get them, and it's brutal. And I started feeling I could bury the second guy. Some of these guys coming in from out of town, I could bury this guy. And so I literally quit my job making over $100,000 with a bunch of stock options and all that stuff, because I just wanted to see what it was like to be the second guy. And I thought, I'll probably have to go back to work here in probably a couple years. I'll probably have to get some kind of a job again, but I just want to do this for 2 years. And that, I haven't had to go back and do it, so that's great. But yeah, there were some moments. I mean, my dad was not, he wasn't too happy about it when I told him that, he told me no. I was 33. He's like, no. I wasn't really asking permission on this one, Dad. And he's come around, but.
Well, it's because it's working for you.
Yeah.
Almost 2 decades in now, Greg Warren. You can catch the special on Amazon. See him around St. Louis, but also traveling the country. Hopefully that's still going to happen over the next few months. And I've also wondered, and I think I texted you this,
oh yeah,
morning show, because you were going to be on KTRS locally with McGraw, And I've always wondered this because when I did morning radio, we had, the comedy club say, hey, do you want Norm Macdonald? We're like, sure. Like, he's coming in?
Yeah.
And they're like, oh, don't worry, he's just as weird at 7 a.m. as he is at 7 p.m.
Yeah.
I'll never forget the whole interview. Somebody has a clip somewhere, but he just goes, yeah, St. Louis, all right. Like, that was the whole bit.
His thing, man, he's a really bright guy, but his thing, he was a judge when I was on Last Comic Standing, so I didn't really get to know him, but I know people that know him well. Like, he kind of wants to, he's going to do whatever the opposite of what is expected of him. Like, if he was doing this thing right here, he'd send it off the rails. Yeah, he just thinks it's hilarious.
It was fun but weird, but I always thought these guys come in. We had Jimmy Walker from Good Times fame. Joe Rogan was in town. Now he's the king of the podcast. He was hosting some event. It might have even been during his MMA work or something coming in. The guy Mike from Mike and Molly. But I always
Billy Gardell. He's a buddy of mine. He's great, man.
It's super really friendly and happy and
great comic too.
And they're always getting in a car and they do sports radio. Then they'd go over to the news talk. Then they go to the FM guys. And I thought it's really hard, isn't it? When you walk in, it's kind of like, hey, be funny, especially in the morning.
Yeah, I mean, it sort of just becomes like it's part of the job, and then actually after a while you sort of get comfortable with it. The only thing is that's uncomfortable is you have to sort of assess what they want real quick, because there's some shows that they want you to do material, they want, and that it kind of plays well, and there's this sort of hopefully an artful way to weave it into the conversation if the guy's really good at interviewing you. But then there's some people that are just they can't stand material, and they're like, "What are you doing your material for?" I'm like, "Well, I thought we were supposed to.
That's what you wanted.
I thought we were supposed. I've been grilled for that, and I'm like, yeah, it is a little weird that I'm doing material, but I thought that's what we were doing. So yeah, I mean, I've kind of grown to really like it over the years, and it's sort of big part of the business for me. Like I'll probably call 100 radio stations over the next 2 weeks to promote the special. So, I've had a lot of fun on air in St. Louis. Courtney Landrum, who used to be at Y98, has a new show at the Arch, and it's really good. I've known her for so long, and I just she thinks like a stand-up comic, so it's really fun to go on her shows.
Yeah, and if you know somebody, it's probably a different vibe. They're not going to be like, hey, Greg's here, say something funny. I just always felt that awkwardness with Jimmy Walker. I grew up watching Good Times. It was more awkward because the handler comes in and said, no mention of dynamite.
He will not say dynamite.
Yeah, and I was like, what? I had like 5 things that are related to that.
He will not say, I don't know if he still is like that, but for the longest time he's like, I'm not saying the word dynamite.
Yeah, it was a big buzzkill for me, but I understand. There are limitations.
I'll say it if you want.
You'll say dynamite.
Yeah, no, I got no problem.
Greg Warren with us. The Kilcoyne Conversation is presented by Triad Bank. You get online at triadbanking.com. St. Louis-based bank that started in 2005, located in Frontenac on Clayton Road, real close to that intersection of Lindbergh and Highway 40. Also, good folks at Marie de Villa Senior Living, the corner of Clayton and Wideman Road since 1960, providing premium senior living. First ever podcast interview in a gazebo at a park with a comedian and a possible tsunami in the background. And we'll wrap it up shortly. Charlie Marlowe, my longtime associate, sidekick, I call him.
I love that guy.
Nothing more offensive than sidekick. But he says everything is 20 minutes. Every car ride's 20 minutes. Every interview should be 20 minutes. That's his theory. Like, it started with car rides. He said everything in St. Louis is 20 minutes.
Yeah.
And then I would say, hey, would you go out to Wentzville? He goes, dude, that's too far. I'm like, I thought it was going to be 20 minutes.
Man. Yeah.
So we always say on our podcast, Martin and Marlowe, we try and go around 20 minutes and not hold anybody too long because they're getting out of their car, in theory. But I noticed you were in the military. Is that right? Did I read?
It's a stretch, man.
I didn't know. I thought I knew you. I didn't know that.
Yeah, I was. I mean, my first year of college, I went to West Point, so that's
okay.
Yeah, I quit.
Okay.
I went for one. I did go the full plebe year, and then I left. I didn't want to stay. I went to Mizzou.
Okay.
Yeah.
They're often compared, West Point and Missouri.
Very similar. Yeah.
No, I just saw something about military, and I'm like, I've never known. I knew you were in the business world, got into comedy, and a wrestler.
Yeah.
That was the part I didn't know.
It was it's really hard to. I mean, officially, I think, I had like an honorable discharge, but I you see guys that are in the military, and it's really hard to say that I was in the military.
They don't want you to be in that group.
They don't want me. Yeah, I was what they call in the Army a quitter. Is what? Yeah.
I'm glad I brought up that fun topic. Well, Greg and I will finish on this because I think one of the first times I was with you or met you was at a Tony LaRussa event. It's for ARF.
Yeah, man.
And he would always have you hosting and doing material, which was great. But I would always think, God, this is my chance to do just a little bit of material. And we're at the Fox or some, great spot downtown. Yeah. And I'm behind the curtains, and he pulls me aside, and you're going to come up a little bit later. And he said, hey, when you get up there, don't be fucking around and thinking you're funny. He goes, I got some real goddamn comedians here. And he said, you don't need to go up there and try and be funny. He said, do your little bit. He says, intro the band and get out. And I was really hurt because I had some jokes.
You would have been fine.
I had some jokes, and I was
you would have done great, man.
I was like, is this your speech? No wonder you lost the NLCS. I'm like, is this your go get 'em speech? But he knew you were coming up. He said, I got a real goddamn comedian. Don't screw this up. So he holds you in high regard, okay?
That's really cool to hear. Yeah. He was really, really cool to me, man. He's like a big satellite radio comedy guy. That's, I think, how he sort of knew who I was. And then he's real tight with Kathleen Madigan. Man, she told me a pretty good story one time. It was when she lived in L.A., and when the Cardinals would play L.A., Tony would always have her come down to the field. He'd hang out with her before the game. And they're always playing that Gibson home run in Dodger Stadium, and he was managing the A's at the time. And, so he's like, they start playing it, and LaRussa tries, I don't want to see that. I don't want to watch that. And then so Kathleen's like, okay, it's still going, Tony. It's he's going around second base now. He's pumping his. I was there, Kathleen. I don't need the play-by-play.
Oh man, so many LaRussa stories that have nothing to do with baseball. Yeah. And it was at the stadium we called it FOT. Friend of Tony.
Yeah.
And the clubhouse guys would be like, hey, and they'd be like, couple of FOTs today. Check it out. And go on the field. And it was always the guy who looked like he was probably in Deep Purple at some point, And then you find out he was. It was And Tony loved these
Bruce Hornsby. Yeah.
Well, in one time, this is the old Bush Stadium. This is going way back. He grabbed me. He said, hey, you like Chris Isaac? And I said, yeah. He goes, look, there he is. And I go, oh, that's cool. He goes, yeah, go interview him. And I said, what? About what? He said, no, he'll get a kick out of it, man. Go on, go. And so my photographer and I are down there getting interviews for the game that night, and I go up to Chris Isaac. I'm like, hey, Mr. Isaac. I mean, I don't know. And he's like, hey, how you doing? And I said, you want to do an interview? He goes, sure. What about? And I said, I don't know. And just kind of talked about his friendship with Tony. But there were so many moments like that. And that's where the personality of him, if you have that many friends, you have to have a good personality.
Oh, yeah, man.
Because there's a lot of coaches who are just kind of asses and they probably don't have any friends, and they don't.
Yeah.
And so people who thought that about Tony, if they found out how many friends he had, they'd be like, wow, he must really have a good personality.
Oh, yeah, no, he's
that people didn't realize.
Engaging, yeah. I mean, I don't know him well, but the little interaction we had, he was really couldn't have been nicer, man.
Well, I'll never forget Greg Warren because Tony put me in my place.
I feel bad for that.
And it was in the off season, and he put me in my place.
I probably crossed Tony, but I just feel bad about it.
Yeah, I support him in this stance, but Greg, great to see you. Hopefully we'll see you back out on the road.
Hey, thanks a lot, man. Thanks a lot.